Next project up, 4401 Ridge Avenue. Is there RCO representative? East Falls Community Councils, is the RCO representative present also?
Yes. Hillary Langer.
The developers here?
Yes, Sean Whalen here from Vintage Law on behalf of the developer, and you should also see a Michael Brawler from Umbra Architects.
Were you able to find them?
He texted that he is on the call. So.
Hello, this is Michael.
Okay. All right. So the developer can go ahead and start.
All right. Thank you very much, Chairman. I will begin and then turn you over to Michael as quickly as possible. This project, 4401 Ridge Avenue, is right at the corner of Ridge and Merrick's roads in Ridge Avenue and Merrick Road in East Falls. It's an approximately 85,000 square foot lot. We are proposing 185 apartments with 189 parking spaces, all with first floor commercial along Ridge. And we've had to date numerous RCO meetings and a staff meeting with the Planning Commission. And we've adopted or tried to adopt many and incorporate many of the comments that have been provided to us to date. So I'm going to let Michael Brawler walk you through kind of the project and what's been changed, and I think much to the better. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean. Just to kind of, I'll try to move quickly because I know we have 10 minutes. Just to give you a sense of where it is, East Falls, a portion of Philly, but it gives you a sense. It's on the north side of Ridge Avenue, which is parallel to Kelly Drive there and the East Falls Bridge. Next slide, please. Just to give you a sense of the immediate context, to the east is the Falls Ridge Apartments. Immediately behind that is its parking lot, and then it abuts Division Street. Along Ridge Avenue, across to the south of us, is the Falls Bridge Lofts. It's about it is 5 stories. And then probably a project that you've seen also on at some point in your history as 4300 down on the corner next to Calumet, across from the Dunkin' Donuts. Next slide, please. Some existing, actually, this is probably around wintertime, some sites. This is some photos. This is a photo looking northwest of the corner. Next slide, please. And then another image, you could see this is looking north. This is on Ridge Avenue, looking northeast. You can kind of see that highway sign. That's a designation for an on-ramp to 76. Next slide, please. As Sean mentioned, it's 185 units. It's got some commercial space on the corner of Merrick Road, which abuts or is perpendicular to Ridge Avenue. And again, this just kind of gives you more of an overview. I will come back to this, but just to kind of give you a sense of what we're talking about. Next slide, please. This project is in for a couple of variances. One is being a steep slope, which is kind of a man-made slope. There was some PHA housing on the site at one point. You could see in that lower left-hand corner, that's from actually not too long ago, 96, what was there, and a high-rise up on the hill. But essentially, those slopes are man-made, and that's part of one of the variances. Right-hand corner kind of gives you a sense of the difference in elevation that we're talking about between Ridge Ave and the upslope. Merrick Road, which I mentioned, goes directly into Ridge. That elevation change is about 30 feet up, so it's a challenging site, which we kind of love. Next slide, please. Zoning plan. We have some more architectural plans, which will give you kind of I think, a better sense of this. But this is really just to show confirmation of turning radii, and et cetera. But I can tell you that on the south end there, that is retail. And our residential entry is about 2/3 of the way up Merrick Road. And then beyond that is an entry to the parking structure and the surface parking. Next slide, please. A landscape plan, and this is a little devoid of some information right now. We've been in contact with East Falls Development Corporation as far as what they're trying to do along Ridge Ave, which is pretty awesome as far as street improvements, including a furnishing zone, bike racks, street trees, all that fun stuff. So this just kind of gives you kind of a more of a 30,000-foot view. What we're trying to do is maintain a soft buffer along Ridge Ave. Immediately to our west is another site. It seems to our eyes a very challenging site to develop. So we think this is a good transition between us and the next site down. Next slide, please. This is what I was mentioning about the East Falls Development Corporation. Their ideas on the on how to improve that street, and that's literally in front of our building there, but it goes up and down Ridge. Next slide, please. This is also from the master plan, and we envision that soft edge along Ridge to be more of a naturalized landscape, not a hyper-manicured idea of landscape, but kind of more of a naturalistic idea. Next slide, please. Ideas of what we're doing for a plant palette, colorful ideas, spring bloom, etc. Next, please. Okay, so these are some diagrams to give you a very kind of quick idea of how we situated the building. On the left hand, like I mentioned, 30 feet difference on Merrick. The program in the middle there is what was described to us or as a program requirement from TAPCO. We chose to put our building, make the urban corner and set the building up into hill. There's precedent, actually historical precedent in the vicinity for that idea. And then what we did is kind of let the site kind of dictate and not kind of be a generator of the massing. So we stepped the building up Merrick Road, and that's that idea as well. And then number 5 there, redefine. What we mean by that is that we wanted to kind of reflect or inflect ideas of setting the building mass in to recognize kind of the public realm idea and kind of set that off as different. I'll talk about that a little bit into it concerning change materials and things like that. And then the last one kind of gives you a better sense, I think, of what we were talking about, or I was talking about that soft edge. Next slide, please. A site section looking west, kind of give you a sense of, again, stepping down the hill. And then the next slide beyond that. This is a site section looking south on Merrick to kind of give you a relationship of the Falls Ridge apartments and kind of how we relate to that across the way.
Michael, just to let you know, you do have 3 minutes left.
Okay, great. Sounds good. Next slide. Very quickly, the first level plan, the retail corner, bike room, trying to activate that corner. And again, kind of using the ideas of the Development Corporation Master Plan as well. Next slide. Architectural plan, a little bit more information as far as the entry and the residential lobby. The next slide. And then that's the next level up. And then the next slide will kind of give you a sense. I'm sorry, can you go one more slide? Thanks. Overall plans all the way up through the building, just to give you a sense how it steps back, how we use those steps to put green roofs and roof deck for the as amenity spaces for the residential units. Next slide. Residential lobby enlarged in case we need to talk about it. Nothing really there. Next slide. We looked around as far as the immediate context, as far as what other people were doing, but also our immediate neighbors, but also up the street of, of kind of earthy materials. The image on the right, that project, I think that's a little bit of an older idea, but earthy materials is kind of what we were thinking. Next slide. Historical imagery, like I mentioned, about setting back off the street, kind of more homogeneous ideas of stucco on these. Luckily, 4432 is still there, which looked awesome. Next slide, please. We love this. We love the East Falls Bridge. Obviously, what we love about it is that it performs and that it has this level of fun detailing with the Art Deco guardrail and stuff. But it basically, it's an icon. Next slide. So the materials in themselves, the colors on the upper right-hand corner, we've got two metal panel colors, one being kind of a gray zinc, and then more of an earthy accent, metal color 2, which you'll see that we put near the public realm area. And what we like about the standing seam and kind of the staggered joint is that it's going to change and look different all the time in different parts of the day. Architectural masonry are on the left for retaining walls and some foundation, exposed foundation. Next slide. Sorry, a bit out of breath. Just getting back to this, you can kind of see the earthy material along the base in more kind of a contrast of a lighter gray skin above. Next slide. This is an image that we showed with really through the 3 RCOs that we've been to. And then the next slide will show the difference between them and the information, or I mean the comments that we got back from CDR. So we lightened the material, we added the kind of reddish, earthy color, and set back the massing on the uphill side. So it reads as kind of a 7-story idea as well. Next slide.
Your 10 minutes have passed, so you can kind of.
Can I get this right?
Yep.
Old image, next slide, please. We added balconies, changed material color. Next slide. Same idea. This is where we were, and you'll see the next one where we set the massing back, and we changed the material, added kind of an earthy tone. Next slide. And this is just kind of a closer view of kind of what we call the public realm area towards the retail, hopefully retail. You could just kind of sit here if you like. Or, I'm sorry, we have a series of elevations, which is really just more of the same.
Thank you. Staff?
Good afternoon. This is a case 1. The proposal is greater than 100,000 square feet of new gross floor area. The site is almost 2 acres. It is CMX3 zoned. There are zoning variances required for the steep slopes, as well as for having, as well as 2 off-street loading spaces were required. 1 is provided. The present use is a vacant tree lot. The proposed use is about 179,000 total gross square feet, consisting of 185 dwelling units, 4,400 square feet of commercial space, 186 vehicular parking spaces, 62 bicycle parking spaces. There was a community meeting held to fulfill the RCO requirement on February 17th, 2021, and we received a letter confirming that meeting on April 1st. Next slide, please. This project has 4 of the 5 realms of civic design review. Next slide, please. So some additional context, staff notes the eclectic nature of the adjacent sites and the amount of recent construction and speculation, all highlighted in sort of that lavender tone. A number of those have also come in for civic design review. We also know that there is a through connection on private land between Kelly Drive and Ridge Avenue across the street from the site that would put you closer to the Schuylkill River Trail. Next slide, please. There are some comments still related to the pedestrian component for complete streets. Next slide, please. Staff notes that there's a 42-foot wide curb cut on Merrick Road, and We asked the applicant just to follow through on their statements to explore different ways to make that safer for pedestrians, including mountable medians and potentially different paving patterns. We also note that the loading zone, given its geometry configuration, may result in trucks which overhang the property line on the sidewalk. We're asking the applicant to see if they can do more to pull the loading zone further within the site. Next slide, please. We do support some recent clarifications from the applicant in response to staff comments to use a masonry retaining wall rather than smooth concrete along the Ridge Avenue sidewalk. We just also request more information on the type of masonry that is intended. We also support the recent addition of 2 bicycle racks each along Ridge Avenue and Merrick Road to support the commercial spaces and the residential entrance. Next slide, please. We support the openness and engagement of the corner at Merrick Road and Ridge Avenue. Next slide, please. Well, staff does question the use of a single material and detail system for such large areas of facades, which supports the relief and plane changes on the lower levels. We encourage more relief and changes in plane on the upper levels. Next slide, please. We do support the recent change to lessen the prominence of vehicular entries on Merrick Road shown in the previous elevations. Next slide, please. We support this extensive vegetative screening of the parking from Ridge Avenue. We also encourage retaining wall or screen at the edge of the parking area to screen headlights from properties across the street. We did see the applicant's recent change to a note for a structural guardrail there, but we do wonder if that will be enough to screen headlights. Next slide, please. Staff also notes as a sustainable design issue that a large portion of the site is covered by the building and by parking. In conjunction with a black metal facade, if that was going to be chosen, this would contribute to the heat island effect and might not optimize stormwater management. Potential remedies could include use of permeable materials for the parking, increased areas of the green roof, or provide canopies for the parking areas. Next slide, please. Staff does support the exploration of alternate facade colors, which could lessen heat island effects and contribute to the refinement of the building design. We also support the use of balconies facing the Schuylkill River to activate the facade. Next slide, please. Staff notes only 6 of the 12 metrics for sustainable design are being met. Staff encourages more metrics to be met. That concludes staff comments.
Thank you. The RCO is present. Does RCO representative wish to speak? And are there members from the public that wish to speak?
Yes. Yeah, I'd like to speak. This is Hilary Langer, Chair of the East Falls Community Zoning Committee.
Yes.
Let me clarify first of all, do I have 2 minutes or 10 minutes?
Well, you're part of the committee at this point. So you've been elevated to the committee, but keep in mind, this is not zoning. This is only design related matters affecting the public realm.
Sure, okay. Well, I'd like to run through and hit some of the highlights in the letter that we sent in to the CDR. We did have 3 meetings, January 20th, February 17th, which was the required meeting before the CDR. Within that meeting, we did actually have an informal vote, which was counted through the raising of hands. I'll summarize that by saying that within the meeting, we couldn't verify who were community council members, and there were obviously attendees from the Development Corporation there. But support is presented. There were 12 votes in favor. Opposed to the project, there was 7. And then support only with changes, we had 14. So basically that boils down to, in a very unofficial poll, of 21 opposed to 12 support of the project as presented at that meeting. March 17th, we added another meeting because through the notifications process, only 1 resident was notified in the adjacent phase 1 development adjacent to the site. So we organized another meeting in which representatives and residents of the actual communities that are immediately adjacent attended. And some of these comments are noted here. So moving on, just in the highlights, if, you know, one thing about East Falls is that it is a community of invested, mostly homeowners. And a lot of the issue with this project has been is that we have yet another apartment building, mostly consisting of one-bedroom apartments in a very attractive commuter location. And so we're concerned that it's not reflecting the context of East Falls, which is a community of stakeholders. So we are definitely at odds with the use of this building as a basically one-story apartment warehouse. I think the development in the back, if you could go to the perspective where you showed it's an overhead view looking down. That's good. That's good enough. So, you know, basically the comment's been made that the building in back there is kind of warehousing. And it's at odds with the context of our community, because what we have is we have buildings that front onto the street. It can be Ridge Avenue, it can be Midvale Avenue, Indian Queen Lane, doesn't matter what it is. We have buildings that front onto the street. So in this development, you have the vast portion of the inhabitants of this building warehoused to the back of the site. So there's no eyes on the street, there's no contact with the street, there's no entry, exits on the street. And in fact, when you look at this development, you know, what the community has really wanted is the revitalization of Ridge Avenue, the enlivenment of building on the street, people on the street, retail on the street. Is we kind of want Ridge Avenue to be improved. So in fact, when you look at this development, there's an investment in infrastructure and construction, the least of which is on Ridge Avenue. So pretty much we've got 110 feet of development on Ridge Avenue, and then we have a parking lot. So the attention to Ridge Avenue, the opportunity here to enliven Ridge Avenue is being lost with this kind of step back form of building. So, and let's just take a walk up Merrick Road here to the top of the site. If you look at the section, you don't need to go to the cross section supplied. That corner step back there is 75 feet above the sidewalk. It's actually opposite homes that are only 2-story. So, you know, once again, this is a situation where we have an oversized building placed there at the back of the site, at a corner across homeowners who live in 2-story homes. We also have a situation with the height of the building there where it's actually going to go up past some of the lower levels of the homes on the phase 2 development there at Hilltop. And where their views are not obstructed by height, they're going to be obstructed by the leading edge of that super block in the back there. Definitely our suggestion is that if there's going to be a construction that is going to enliven Ridge Avenue, should strongly be considering bringing that super block in back, lowering the height, bringing it down onto Ridge Avenue, and making the connection along Ridge Avenue to a development at 4442 Ridge Avenue, which currently with this development will be completely stranded. It is an apartment building with retail below it. This is an opportunity to connect through to that building up there, sustain retail and connect otherwise what will be an isolated site over there that no one will ever walk to, losing opportunities of walkability here. So just running through here a little quicker. I don't want to go over my 10 minutes. You know, if this were a lower density site here, closer to what was previously a phase 3 agreement of 30 market rate rental units, if we were going to be approaching a lower density through this project, we would be alleviating the issues of congestion that are going to be contributing to an already super congested Ridge Avenue. With or without the pandemic, Ridge Avenue is congested. There's going to be 185 cars going in and out of Merrick Street, and already there's a lot of parking on Merrick Street, and there are some neighbors who can speak to that. There's going to be the specter of multiple deliveries to 185 units of Amazon, UPS, grocery deliveries, pizza, people moving in and out. There is just going to be a backlog of those kind of vehicles supporting this development. So, you know, how is the one loading dock going to handle that? What is going to be the what is going to be that scenario? And you know, we can't not talk about that this building has one point of entry up at the top end there. Only one point of entry to get in there. Only has 2 elevators. So how does that as a strategy for social distancing work out, you know, in the situation that this pandemic continues?
Right.
There's just not going to be that kind of separation that you get there. And that is, so.
All right, sorry,
I would just like to finish up by saying that of the proposals that have been made in this neighborhood, currently this has the least sustainable features on it. And before I sign off, I would just ask that the moderator recognize, because I think a lot of people will have their hands raised. So please take note of these names: Roxanne Destuet, L.B. Young, Emily Nichols, and Meg Greenfield. And just hold on to those names. And so that would conclude my summary of the letter that I had that we had submitted as a zoning committee as feedback from residents.
thank you. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak?
Yep, all 4 of the names that Hillary just named have their hands raised. So I'm just going to go down the line.
All right.
The first is LB.
If you can state your name.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Hi, this is LB Young, East Falls resident, and thanks for giving me a moment to speak. And just as a local resident, here's my perspective. I think recent large-scale developments in East Falls have done a better job of incorporating sustainable strategies into the design. So whether it's the amount of bicycle storage, or the extent of green roof, or the extent of, or lack thereof of surface parking, other recent developments that have been approved across the street, literally, have done a better job. And I think these market rate developments that have been able to do these things within, a market, our current market, kind of set the measure. And so, if that's the measure, I think that this project doesn't need it. And I think in terms of communication with the community, while they've kind of given us a lot of assurances, they actually haven't given us really great documents. So, they're going for steep slopes variance, but they haven't shown us any real analysis or calculations about it. Same thing with the loading. They're trying to get a variance so that they don't have to put in as many loading docks as they're supposed to be, by code. This is fully code. And they've given us basically no kind of, how do they think all of these things are going to happen that Hillary was going to talk about. And then to urban context, I guess the thing is this is really like a buffer zone. And definitely the area, it is a trash strewn lot right now. And I think everybody would like it to be something much better in the future. But this is also Ridge Avenue, and it's a huge connector for our community to the Wissahickon transfer station. And, I think not building along the entire Ridge Avenue property line to the greatest extent possible is anti-urban and anti-pedestrian. And I think that, even with the approved plan development in the area, the pedestrian corridor is really broken and disjointed. But that's why this site is so important, because there are so few ways to make connections, because people do walk, from the Midvale K bus stop up to the Wissahickon transfer station. So I guess for all those reasons, I feel like there's an opportunity here to do a lot more to integrate with the community. I think we'd like it to be integrated, but I don't think this is it.
I am for the moment.
Thank you so much for your comments. There's some background somewhere. Next, member of the public that wishes to speak.
Next is Meg.
Hello, Meg. State your full name, please.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Meg Greenfield. I'm a longtime resident of East Falls, and I was around when the Schuylkill Falls housing project was taken down and the current Falls Ridge site was redeveloped with extensive input from the community. A comment as we start, the developer referred to the Falls Ridge Apartments. The so-called Falls Ridge Apartments are in fact the senior building of the Falls Ridge PHA development. That is not, I don't want anyone to think that's a private building. I will address one major concern, and that is when the community worked with PHA and HUD to redevelop this site, and the warehousing towers were taken down from Schuylkill Falls housing, and the plan was developed for single-family homes across the site, whether they were PHA rentals or residentially occupied, owner-occupied homes, as are right across the street from this Hillary properly called warehouse. The plans were made for single-family green space that was to integrate well with the East Falls community, and with density projected at 300 homes on the entire site, including this portion, which is phase 3 of that development. And this will increase the density by 50% or more, which was contrary to the agreements made between PHA, HUD, and the housing authority.
Yes,
And
yes,
those-
ma'am,
there are
ma'am,
Yeah.
I understand your point, as it relates to whatever that agreement was previously. Do you have specific comments about the design of this building? Other
This
than
design is, I second what Hillary said. It is a warehouse. It is inconsistent and unfair to the people living across the street and up the hill because of its density and mass, and it will not encourage community participation.
Thank you, sir.
It's way out of line, and it is inconsistent with the legal obligations of PHA.
Thank you. Did you have another comment?
I would also comment, as did LB, that the traffic on Ridge is also already difficult. There is access to City Avenue as well as the Wissahickon Transfer Center a quarter, an eighth of a mile up. I haven't measured it. And it will make that problem even worse. Finally, in speaking with us, the developer advised that parking, while available on site, will cost extra, but that tenants could park on Merrick Road. Merrick is already parked up. We walk up there frequently. It will not sustain that kind of parking. It is unreasonable, unfair to the people who live across the street. There are people from across Ridge who already park there because otherwise they're required to pay for parking.
I've noted, ma'am, I've noted your points. Your 3 minutes have passed. I want to thank you so much for your comments. I have them noted. Thank you so much. Is there another member of the public that wishes to speak?
Yes, next is Emily.
Thank you.
Yes.
My name is
State your full name, Emily.
My name is Emily Nichols. I am a homeowner, 12, almost 13-year resident of East Falls. I'm also the president of the East Falls Community Council, and I sit on the East Falls Development Corporation Board. I want to make two quick comments in regard to some things that some folks said, and then also make some comments about specifically the public realm of this design. The initial community meeting that was held, during the course of that meeting, based upon those in attendance and conversations with near neighbors, we had concerns that there wasn't proper notification, which was the reason why we held a second community meeting, to make sure that the near neighbors would be able to have a chance to weigh in on this project, which is basically on their front doorstep. I also, obviously, comments have been made about any past agreements. That's outside of the purview of this. I want to focus on three parts of the public realm: sidewalk and streets, building height and bulk, and parking and loading dock conditions, or loading conditions. So the first concern is traffic. That was mentioned by Meg. I'm sure it'll be mentioned by everyone. This project sits along Ridge Avenue, which is basically a 2-lane road that ends up being an intersection between I-76, Roosevelt Expressway, Kelly Drive, and Lincoln Drive. And so we get considerable through traffic, but that stretch is also an entry into East Falls for many community members that really cannot get to their homes without going through that busy stretch of Ridge Avenue. I myself can't get home without going through that busy stretch. And there are times, even now, during the pandemic, in the past month, when I have sat for 15 to 25 minutes simply to get between Ferry Road, which sits under the Twin Bridges, to 3 blocks away, which is Calumet Street, which is the only way for me to access my home. So traffic is a considerable concern. Related to that, I want to mention sort of parking and loading conditions. Parking in East Falls is, for many residents, a challenge. A large portion of East Falls are single-family homes that have off-street parking in what I would call the upper part of East Falls. In the lower part of East Falls are primarily row homes. and some now apartment and rental units. And those recent developments, and I say recent, many of the images that were shared from the developers of the projects that they looked at, which influenced their design, with the exception of one image, were all what I would call recent additions to the community. And 2 or 3 of them are ones that have happened since I've lived there, and I have watched the parking disappear during that time. So most of us who live in the lower part of East Falls are parking on the street, and there simply isn't sufficient street parking. The last part of that is...
Your 3 minutes have passed, ma'am. So you can just, your 3 minutes have passed.
I've spoken for 3 minutes?
Yeah, well, no, your 3 minutes, actually they're 2 minutes, but your 3 minutes have passed.
Can I finish?
And you had, yes, you had said you had one more,
Okay.
one more.
Loading conditions. So there is actually a variance that they are requesting. One of the variances has to do with 1 or 2 loading docks. Given the state of deliveries in our post-pandemic world, deliveries that happen along that stretch block traffic for everyone because there's simply no place for the delivery trucks to go. So that is problematic. The last thing I'm going to say, and then I will end, building height and bulk. Simply look at the drawing that sat up on the screen for quite a while. This development is completely out of scope to anything else that you would see in East Falls. And that it dwarfs everything, and it's not in keeping with the feel of the community that we've been trying to build and where we live.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Anyone else from?
Yeah, we have one more. Roxanne.
One more? Okay.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. State your full name.
Roxanne DeStuet.
Mm-hmm.
I am a resident in the East Falls community for over 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
I lived here when the proposal for the Schuylkill Falls public housing development was developed. A lot of hard work went into getting this community to look the way it does. We are concerned with the design of the building, the impact that it will have on the community. I've spoken with many of my neighbors that weren't aware. We weren't notified of this development until late. So the neighbors are really concerned, and I would like to ask for a second meeting so that more people can have input into this design of the building, and the true character of the community can be heard, because this is an earthly setting community. We, as everyone else stated, traffic is just a bear on any given day. Accidents coming from any part of the city, we get that traffic.
Yep. So I hate to cut you off, but we've heard the issues around traffic and the if there's any additional design items you wish to speak to, please do.
Okay.
If not, I understand that you have a desire that the committee not allow this project to move forward from here, but to ask them to come back.
Yes, and we definitely would like to see a different structure. As I look at the overhead views, there were several shots, and the high-rises were imploded in 1996. I was part of that as well. And the overhead shot of the design reminds me of high-rises. So we went from demolishing 2 high-rises, and now we're going to have to look at something that's not quite as big, but it's on the same level as a high-rise. It doesn't fit on any angle that you look at it. As my neighbors have stated, the senior building is adjacent to this property, and it's swallowing up the senior building. The homeowners on Merrick Road would also be affected by the traffic because they're trying to get traffic to come in and out of Merrick Road. We can't accommodate any more traffic.
Yep,
Schoolhouse
actually,
Lane.
Yep, we have that. We've already heard about the traffic, so we're good with that. So, and your 3 minutes have actually passed, ma'am. So I thank you so much for your call, and I've noted all of the comments that you made, in addition to the ones that have already been made. So thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Was that it for public comments?
Yep, that's all the hands that are raised.
All right.
Chairman Johns, this is Sean Whalen. If I could take 30 seconds, I'll neglect all the zoning related questions and everything and just kind of give you a little context as to the purely planning related comments that were raised.
No.
Maybe give some context as to.
No, not right now. Let's hear from the committee. Does the committee have any comments? And then we can go back to you to make a comment. Open up to the committee. I'll start briefly with, I know this site very well. I guess this is my day for PHA locations or adjacent locations. This was actually the first site I worked at when I went to PHA, the old school building that was there. I'm very familiar with implosion of the high rises. I'm very familiar with the plans that were proposed ultimately for the site. So it's interesting that this building is different from what sort of the community has been talking about over the years, which is interesting to me. I can't speak to that, and we can't speak to that for this committee because the project is zoned as a matter of right. So it's really about that as it relates to the design. So I just want to keep that in context as we sort of talk about the project sort of moving forward, for committee members too, just so they kind of understand some of that context. I know there were former agreements and things that were made, but we're here and we're now at this point and we can't address that. That's in PHA or whatever. So we can't really address those issues related to those former agreements. Any comments from the committee?
I have a comment about the facade. I appreciate the addition of the balconies facing south, but I think more attention could be given to breaking up the facade so it doesn't feel so monolithic, particularly along Ridge and Merrick streets. I think the use of one single material kind of points to the large length and height of the facade, so maybe some exploration could be done to kind of break up that materiality.
Is it okay if I speak? Could I respond, or do you want to?
Well, I just want to hear that there are additional comments.
Okay, sorry.
I would like to add a couple of things. I think that the corner retail space looks like it would be quite successful, and I'm actually happy with how that piece addresses the street. If the landscaped area going to the west was really well done, it could be very pleasant to walk by. It doesn't address the community concerns about more retail, but if it's really maintained beautifully, it could be quite beautiful, and it could provide some needed habitat to the area. But again, I don't want to negate the community's concerns on street frontage. I do think that it feels tight to me on Merrick Street. Like, I don't think that road is very successful as it is now, despite the fact that it has the little median. I don't think that the plant beds to the east that were shown as an example are particularly successful. They're better than they were. They've been replanted a few times. But I think that the breathing room on Merrick could be better. When I saw how the wall sort of interacted with this street and how you were walking right next to it, I don't have a solution to suggest to that because I hesitate to make it feel more suburban. But I do think that how the treatment of the facade there and the inevitable retaining walls will be very important. And maybe it does need to step back a little bit because, you're going to sort of save it with the plant bed, but I don't know, you have to study it. And then I was surprised that the parking the lots for the apartment building were not connected in any way through the landscaped area to the street. I think people would want to do that. And I think that that would help to give a little bit of activity. And, you know, and I wondered, I saw the roof terraces on the building, which of course are for people of the building, but it didn't really look like they were capitalizing completely on the views to the river, because it looked like some of them were lower and you'd be trying to see over sort of the next roof. Maybe it's just the way that that image was taken, but I don't think so. And I think that those sort of spaces up in the air could really make great public space, albeit only for the people who live in the building. But it's a real opportunity to overlook the river. And I think I live up the street in Manayunk, and how we make those connections to the river, both visually and functionally at street level, you know, is really important to quality of life. So trying to gesture toward that in some way, I think would make a big difference. You know, and of course the sustainability stuff of what does the stormwater do? Can we get any of it to infiltrate? I don't know if you have rock there, which might have been driving some of your decisions about how that building sits on the site. But, you know, certainly to have this structure really be more green, clearly that benefits all of us. And, you know, I'm amazed every time we have to make a plea for it.
Yeah, I appreciate the fact that you have created this buffer between Ridge Avenue and the parking. However, there was a comment that was made by the community around the location of your residential portion, your large-scale residential portion, and why you located it at the back of the site and not sort of introduced that at the Ridge Avenue edge. So I'd like to understand why you've done that, and the concern that if there are units that will be fronting on the rest of that hill, they really are not really fronting on anything except the hill. So what was your decision? Why'd you decide to place that large bulk of the building at the back and not at the Ridge Avenue edge, where I'm hearing that the community had a desire to extend sort of the Ridge Avenue frontage?
Sorry, Sean.
Yeah, Chairman Johns, we're happy to jump in. I just don't know, do you want us to wait till the end of all the?
Well, I didn't hear any more comments from the committee, okay. But so you can step in.
I just didn't want to jump on anybody's toes.
Right.
So very quickly, this site, and I don't know if you could go to, who's ever controlling the slides could go to any one of the kind of pulled back renderings so we could see it a little better. So the original plan for this site was, and when this site was ready to be sold, was a huge, essentially cavernous effect onto Ridge Avenue. It was, we could actually build, this property is zone CMX3. It could be built with over 400 units, all fronting right on basically a big tower right on Ridge. That would just make this the kind of dark cavern along Ridge. The developers here thought that was just inappropriate given the way that the hill was and whatnot, and decided instead to kind of step this back in plates and allow the hill to activate the site and allow the height of the hill to provide the views and the coordination between the river, which is so beautiful, and the units that you're looking at. That's why we have the rooftop terrace all along. There's going to be a green roof throughout there. That's actually why the neighbors wanted the balconies, and those were not originally included, but were later added. So it was very intentional to set back the building instead of having this really tall tower right on Ridge, which also would have blocked the views for almost everyone in our building because of all the new buildings going in across the street on the other side of Ridge.
Yeah, the only thing I want to add to that is that it was about kind of sharing that green edge with the community versus taking it in the back more than anything. I think that and the buffer was kind of understandable. It's different than what you've seen, but we think it's kind of a better kind of strategy to the street in this particular case, right? If this was Center City or maybe a little bit more east, then holding that street wall would make perfect sense. But since we're at the end, that was kind of the genesis of or towards the end, towards the the highway sign, et cetera.
Right. Yeah. And the basis for only having the frontage along the portion of Ridge that we do was, as Michael sort of elucidated earlier, we have this kind of greenery, that low-level greenery that's leading up to just past the building up Ridge, sort of to the left of this image, is an extremely steep slope, fully wooded area right across from the 76 on-ramp and off-ramp before you kind of head into Manayunk. It's essentially unbuildable. I mean, maybe everything is buildable in some way, but in essence, it's unbuildable, and it's going to remain heavily wooded forever. And so instead of having this tall building go right up to the edge of those woods and then having this jarring connection between the two, we instead tried to activate the portion of the site where really the activation is most warranted, towards the already continuing activity along Ridge, and soften that transition with our own greenery over to the site. Next,
I would agree with Tab as to that making some sort of connection through that green space to the larger apartments in the rear would probably enhance, the livability of the site and make a better connection to Ridge Avenue there. And also I would consider widening Ridge Avenue, the Ridge Avenue pavement between Merrick, from sort of Merrick Road over, just so that you can create some potential spaces for outdoor dining and the like along Ridge.
So excellent points. One thing to point out here is, and it's not really shown, there's about 8,000 square feet, 7,500 square feet of commercial space on the first floor. There's an additional approximately 2,200 square feet of commercial space, essentially, of extra sidewalk that's covered by the overhanging second floor of the apartment building. So it is very much our intention that the primary corner use, the commercial space in itself, could be divided up somehow if necessary and warranted, but the corner space being some kind of a cafe or a restaurant or coffee shop to really activate that usage through outdoor dining with tables outside, but yet still underneath the overhang. And we particularly see this as a heavily trafficked bike area, and we hope a more trafficked pedestrian area to increase those flows. One other thing that came up, just from a planning perspective, again, I'll pass by the zoning related comments and whatnot and save those for another day, was the loading zone. So the loading zone is only an issue for a variance because this property was, by Councilman Jones, upzoned recently from CMX 2.5 to CMX 3. In CMX 3, the city in the underlying zoning code anticipates a heavy commercial use. And those heavy commercial uses, I mean, you might even find like full-size Targets and stores like that, IKEAs in a CMX3 zone. So in those zones, you need full semi-trailer truck. I think I mixed up the order of those words, but you know what I mean? Full big rig size trucks, and would need 2 loading zones. Here, we will have no such commercial usage. Obviously, we're having a low intensity commercial usage along Ridge. The loading zones are purely for the use, the loading zone rather, which is underneath the primary building up further along Merrick, is one full, actually a full size and a half basically for a big rig truck. We will not have any big rig trucks. We're not having any deliveries of that sort. It was designed with the idea that we would be having, multiple Amazon, Grubhub, UPS, all those sorts of deliveries throughout the day. And so the loading zone as set out can handle up to 4 such vehicles at any one time. So it's really intended to take those types of delivery vehicles or even smaller move in, move out vehicles, the U-Haul trucks or things like that that you would normally see at an apartment building, can easily fit in there and maneuver without blocking any traffic.
Okay.
Additionally,
So
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, we're good. I think we understand that. So yeah, I think that there's a big concern raised about traffic, and with the number of units that are being built and the number of parking spaces that are being built on site, Ridge Avenue is tight anyway. And in rush hour, adding another 186, cars is going to be, I don't know how they're going to manage with that. So I don't know if there have been any additional traffic studies done to address those concerns, but that is going to be a huge concern with the traffic.
Absolutely. And so with that point, you heard some comments about, which were the first we've heard about, no ingress or egress off of Ridge. The particular design of this project was to keep all vehicular traffic going up and off of Merrick and not going in and out on Ridge, simply because, regardless of any signage, we all know what happens in practicality with any kind of ingress or egress off of a major road. People are going left, they're going right, they're turning left off the street into the site, and it really snarls up traffic. So in order to avoid kind of the unfettered ingress and egress of cars from both directions off of Ridge into the site, we fully intend to be working with Streets Department, and they've advised us that we'll have to rework that corner along with the other new developments that are there. We will be providing all traffic going onto and off of Ridge at a metered way, in a metered way through that traffic light. So that way, we're trying to help the traffic. We are not required by the code or in any other way to provide or undertake a traffic study. However, we have heard the community, and we've reached out, and we should have a traffic study any day now, which will be final. And essentially, as you've pointed out, and as everyone knows, the traffic on Ridge Avenue is a nightmare. However, our building will not degrade the traffic along Ridge in this location, according to our traffic engineer. So we will have a formal report that will be presented going forward. But certainly an issue. Something that isn't brought up here is, obviously you have huge bikeability here. You have a train station, I think exactly half a mile away. You have multiple bus routes that go up and down Ridge Avenue. So
yeah, the location is good for public transportation, and it's good for biking and the like right near the park.
And that's certainly not going to take away all the cars. Absolutely.
Right. But you've got 186 parking spaces, so theoretically you got 186 cars, and that's going to add a huge amount of traffic onto Ridge Avenue, which I think is, I don't know how the people are going to deal with it. Any other comments from the committee?
I'd like to make a couple of comments.
Yes.
One, I do think the design is very nicely done, very tastefully done. I think I would echo some of the other committee members' comments around maybe breaking up the longest facade. You could potentially carry the more bronze-colored same material from the ground floor, section, and maybe carve the middle of that long facade out and change the color palette while still keeping the same material composition. That might make it a little less monolithic, perhaps a little bit less industrial and imposing. I think there's a real lost opportunity here. I want to piggyback off of what David said earlier. You have river views here from the roof, and you've got just a farm of what looks to be condensing units. You could potentially reorient where the HVAC goes and provide on the lower roofs more green roof, but also more more deck space in lieu of just flat white roofs. And I think those would be very desirable places for the residents to congregate. Just a note on sort of the general tone of the zoning conversation that we're having here, even though this is not a zoning hearing. It never ceases to amaze me how people who have been in a neighborhood for a long time feel like it's their God-given right to all the street parking that exists today and to use the roads and not have anybody else use the roads around them. So I think it's incumbent on all of us to remember that we live in a city, and a city is an organism, and organisms grow over time. And we have to be open to sharing, our parking spaces, our parks, our roads, and everything else with other residents. And this whole fantasy of Ridge Avenue becoming this pedestrian-friendly, retail shopping corridor is exactly that. It's a fantasy. They're adding some retail here. I think it's very nice. It's better than the abandoned lots that I see all up and down Ridge Avenue. I think it adds, not subtracts from Ridge Avenue. And I actually like the fact that the building is set back largely off of Ridge Avenue with a landscape buffer there to hide some of the parking, because I don't think there's a market for retail along Ridge Avenue, not large quantities of retail anyway, as is evidenced by, the difficulty that a lot of other developers have had to put retail there or propose retail and actually finding tenants, for that retail. I'm curious as to why the development team and their council hasn't just made this zoning code compliant. I get that, Sean, you're saying that CMX3 was not drafted for this particular kind of setting. I'd call it a mid-urban setting, not a dense urban setting. And you have enough in your mind sort of loading and all that kind of stuff. But you got a zoning plan in your hands here. Why wouldn't you just design the project to be zoning code compliant and not have to have the conversation around why you don't have 2 loading spots and you only have 1, whether or not you think you need 2, because otherwise we're sitting here talking about use and height and all the things that come into play when you start asking for zoning variances, rather than talking about the material composition of the building and where it's set on the site and all the things that are more germane, I think, to this hearing. So I'll stop digressing now and just say I like the project. I think it would definitely add to the neighborhood. I don't live in this neighborhood, but I've been here many times, and I've done some development in this neighborhood. And I think that the design team, Umbra in particular, has done a very nice job in designing a contemporary building that I don't think is out of place here. I think it actually is a very nice tip of the cap to some of the former industrial history that this part of Philadelphia has. So, and let's all remember that we don't own the streets and own the parking spots that are on the streets. They're a public good and they should be shared. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any additional comments from the committee members?
Yeah. At some point, am I permitted to make a comment?
Yes.
Thank you.
Did you want to make a comment now?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
I'm becoming a little disturbed that a lot of the speakers here have not really understood the true context of this site and some of the subtleties as to how neighboring residents are going to be affected. So I just want to speak to one thing, and that is the continued development of the building on Ridge Avenue. It doesn't have to be retail. It just it can be residential. It can be entrances to condominiums, to homes, to an apartment building cluster. The fact is, what's being built here is a parking lot, which is fronting on Ridge Avenue. That's not, so, you're creating another gap here that's like the 2 gas stations we already have. It's like the gap we have underneath Roosevelt Boulevard. This is an opportunity to plug the gaps, and there is a need to connect to the development on the other side of the street at the other property line here. The other thing is where the building stops is right where a gap exists on the street. You're looking right there at the back of Castle Ringstead, and then you're looking at a piece of park. If you continue the building with residences along Ridge Avenue, those residences are going to be looking directly through parkland. Okay, they're not going to be looking into the parking lot of the lofts. They're looking through parkland through to the river. And any building in the back is going to be able to overlook those buildings. So, you know, to say that you're depriving people in the back of a view through to parkland, I don't think quite gets the context here. And in terms of, you know, I'm sorry, you know, I like the building, but it doesn't belong here in East Falls. It should be down in the Navy Yard. It doesn't get the subtleties of the site, you know, so reduce the size of the building in the back, because that's something you are going to see from the expressway, from everywhere, from Ridge Avenue. Please be respectful to the neighbors who live up on top of the hill behind and next to it. Sure, we're all in the urban realm and we all share our roads, we all share parking, and, you know, we all basically usually live happily ever after, because this is why we all love and live in Philly. But, you know, please recognize there's certain parts of this development which are just oversized, and just CMX3. Homeowners, dwellings, condominiums are allowed in CMX3. It's just that it is a kind of a open, it's up to the developer to see, you know, determine their own return on investment here.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is an approach that manages their investment, and I'm going to say it's in their favor and it's not in the neighborhood favor or continued beneficial development along Ridge Avenue.
Yeah. Dan, you had wanted to make a comment, I believe.
Yeah, thanks. And just as a general comment, I really appreciate the thoughtful input from both the committee members and the community on this project. I think it's a very handsome project, very beautifully articulated. A couple things that may help alleviate some of the concerns of the community, not all of them, but one, I have to push harder on the loading issue. I mean, we have seen such a transformation of delivery and the use of traffic in the last 18 months, but in the last 5 years. And the people that are engaged in last minute delivery, food delivery, driver services are the least well-behaved members of the traffic community. So I think it's incumbent on this project to do more than you think necessary to alleviate the hazard of double parking, off-street loading, street loading and things like that. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Another is, with a high density that this project brings, I think you really have to go above and beyond with providing access to the regional rail system. So, you know, according to Google Maps, a 9-minute walk over to East Falls. This may be an opportunity to engage with the community to improve access even off your site, right? So things like crosswalks, providing shade along the way, safe route through the neighborhood. Maybe that's a way that, even though a typical developer wouldn't think about it, this brings a return on your investment in a kind of unconventional way. I mean, you've taken the architectural articulation so far. Maybe it's a time to match that with some of the other gestures in the community. And finally, another thing which isn't usually thought about as a design issue, but the unit mix here could be could alleviate some of the issues, right? If you have bigger units, make this project accessible to larger families, you have the same square footage, perhaps roughly the same return on investment, but less families mean less cars, mean less traffic. So if the neighbors are wanting to build community and integrate this project, maybe getting away from the overwhelming amount of 1-bedrooms and a few 2-bedrooms, maybe you can put in more 2-bedrooms and some 3-bedrooms, you know, and that would make the target audience a different kind of renter or owner or whatever this is going to be, and bring a different type of community to the site. And finally, the last thing I'll say, it's reinforcing what people have talked about before, but in 2021, to have 0 points on the Planning Commission's scorecard for energy and atmosphere and sustainability is really not acceptable anymore. I mean, just in the last year, it seems like there's been a sea change about how we're thinking about sustainability and resilience. And it's a national conversation, it's a statewide conversation, it's a local conversation, it's a city conversation. As was said earlier, these roof decks could be occupied, they could be shaded with solar PV. There's never going to be shade on this building because of its siting, and you know, improving the performance, energy performance of the building, including distributed energy generation, is something that we really have to more and more insist on, especially from high-end developers, high-end developments like this, where you've put so much care and concern into the architectural articulation. I think it should be matched by some of these other issues as well. That's only my comments. I've said nothing new, but I'm pushing a little further on some of the comments that we've heard from the community and the panel so far.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Any additional comments from the committee members?
Chairman Johns, just one final point to Committee Member Garofalo. I don't know that it was mentioned here today, but it's an excellent point about size of the units. I just wanted to point out that the breakdown is about 25% 2-bedroom units, 50% 1-bedrooms, and only 25% studios, with all of these units being relatively larger than your standard that you would ever see coming before the board. The average unit size is, I believe, just over 700 square feet, including the studios and 1-bedrooms and 2-bedrooms all together. So excellent point, and I sorry that I neglected to bring that up earlier.
All right.
Well, you know, that's more 2-bedrooms than I thought, and that I think that's good. But my advice is advice, and free to take it or consider it as you will. But it could help you solve a couple problems at once by taking another look at that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's creating a different population. You've got families. So any additional comments from committee members? If not, we can go to the comments. Any really comments?
Be right there. Can you see those?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'll increase the size just a little bit. So you grab all the rest over there. Okay. Okay to scroll a little bit?
Yes.
It's the remainder of the RCO comments. And then it's okay to scroll down to the remainder of the comments for.
Yeah, I'm good. I guess if everybody else was good. Okay. I would just add to consider relocating the bulk of the building more towards Ridge Avenue, and allowing the residents above to have sort of just keeping the scale down. It would reduce the overall scale of the building. I think would positively affect the design. Can we add staff comments also? So we have two votes, one to approve the notes. And is there a motion to approve the notes?
Motion to approve the comments.
We have one motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sounds like all were in favor. Any opposed? Okay, that carries. Now I need either a motion to conclude the RCO process or to continue the RCO process. And the RCO leader does have a vote.
I'm going to motion to conclude the RCO process so they can get on with all the zoning conversations they need to have.
We have a motion to conclude. Is there a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Can we take a roll count?
Yes, there's a motion to conclude the civic design review process for 4401 Ridge Avenue, beginning with the RCO. Hillary, do you support the motion?
No.
Okay.
I would like to see it come back a second time.
Dan, do you support the motion?
You're mute. You're
Sorry.
muted, Dan.
Sorry. I'll say no, I don't support the motion.
Okay. Clarissa, do you support the motion?
No, I don't support it.
Leo, do you support the motion?
To quote Tavis, yes, I motion the motion, so I support it. Yes.
Elise, do you support the motion?
No.
Ashley, do you support the motion?
No, I do not.
Tavis, do you support the motion?
I do.
Michael John, do you support the motion?
I do.
Okay. There are 6 opposed to the motion and 3 in support of the motion. Apologies, there are 5 opposed to the motion and 3 in support of the motion.
Okay,
The
so
motion
with
does
that,
not-
say it again.
So there are 5 opposed to the motion and 3 in favor of it, so the motion does not carry.
The motion does not carry, so we will see you again at CDR. And hopefully within that time, you'll have more conversations with the community and maybe make some additional changes. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.